The sheet was too heavy for one pair of hands. Clara Voss had known this since the first morning she took the position, when the head laundress had dropped the wet linen into her arms without ceremony and pointed toward the yard. That was 4 months ago. She had not complained then, and she did not complain now, bracing her boots against the frozen ground and twisting the fabric with both fists until the water ran out in a thin silver rope and fell between the stones. The yard at Brackmere Hall was wide and grey in the early morning. The kitchen garden wall ran along the south side, and beyond it the elm trees stood without leaves, their branches perfectly still in the cold air. There was no wind, there was only the sound of water, and the distant clang of the kitchen bell calling the lower staff to their morning duties, and the particular silence of a great house not yet fully awake. Clara did not look up at the house. She had learned in 4 months that it was better not to. She was reaching for the next piece of linen when she heard the footsteps, small, quick, and entirely wrong for the hour. No child of the servant quarters ran in the yard before 6. The sound came from the far end of the garden path, and when she turned, she saw the girl. She was perhaps 6 years old. She wore a white nightgown with a blue ribbon at the collar, and she was barefoot on the frost, and she was running directly toward Clara with a piece of bread held out in one hand as though it were an offering. Clara set down the linen. The girl stopped 3 feet away, breathing hard from the cold, her dark hair loose around her face, and her eyes very bright and entirely unafraid. She looked at Clara the way children sometimes look at strangers, without the caution that adults learn and never unlearn. "I saved it from supper," the girl said. "I did not want it then, but I thought someone might." Clara crouched down so that she was level with the girl, and the frost came through the knees of her dress, and she did not notice. "That is very kind," Clara said. "Are you not cold?" The girl looked at her feet as though the question had only just occurred to her, and then looked back up. "I forgot my slippers. You had better go back inside before the cold gets into your chest." The girl held out the bread again. She was quite serious about it. Clara took it. It was a small heel of white bread, slightly crushed from being carried in a child hand, and it was possibly the finest thing anyone had done for her in 6 years. She held it in her palm and looked at it, and did not trust herself to speak for a moment. "I am Lily," the girl said. Clara knew the name. She had known it for 4 months. She had stood in the back of the village church on a Sunday 3 months ago, and watched this child sit in the family pew in a red wool coat, and not known what to do with the sight of her. She had gone home that evening and sat on her cot in the laundry cottage, and stared at the wall until the candle burned down. "I am Clara," she said. "Do you work here?" "I do." "In the laundry?" "Yes." Lily looked at the wet sheets hanging on the line and nodded as though this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Mrs. Holt says the laundry maids are very strong," Lily said. "Mrs. Holt is right. Are you strong?" Clara stood and picked up the full bucket of wrung water with one hand and held it steadily without effort. Lily smiled. It was a full and unguarded smile, and it went through Clara like a blade. "You are," Lily said. A door opened somewhere in the house above. A woman voice, not unkind but sharp with anxiety, called the name Lily twice, and then a third time with more urgency. Lily turned toward the sound, and then back toward Clara. "That is my nurse." "I must go." "You must," Clara agreed. "Your slippers first." She had none out here. She had come without them. Clara reached into the pocket of her apron where she kept a folded rag for wiping her hands, and drew it out and crouched down again, and wrapped it around one small bare foot and tucked the ends under. "It will not stay," she said, "but it is something. Go quickly." Lily looked down at the wrapped foot, and then at Clara, and then she leaned forward and pressed a quick kiss against the top of Clara's head, and turned and ran back toward the house. Clara remained crouching on the frozen ground for a long moment after the child disappeared through the kitchen door. She did not allow herself to think the thought that rose in her. She pressed it down and held it there, and then she stood and picked up the bucket and went back to the linen. She was still standing at the line 20 minutes later, her fingers numb and her eyes dry, when the shadow fell across the sheets. She looked up. He was taller than she remembered. He had always been tall, but the years had added something to the way he held himself. Some weight that was not quite grief and not quite severity, but lived in the set of his shoulders and the line around his mouth. He wore no hat. He had clearly come out without intending to. His coat was dark and unbuttoned at the throat, and he was staring at her with an expression she could not immediately read. The Duke of Brackmere had not changed his eyes. They were still the same grey as the elm branches above him, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her grip the sheet she was holding with both hands. She did not speak. She waited. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, as though the words were not entirely under his control, "You are here." It was not a question. Clara said, "Yes, Your Grace," and he turned and walked back into the house without another word. The upper housemaid, a woman named Prue, who had worked at Brackmere Hall for 11 years and knew everything worth knowing about it, told Clara that afternoon that the Duke had been in residence for only 3 days. "He comes up from London for the winter months," Prue said, pushing a load of pressed linen into Clara's arms with the comfortable authority of a woman who had never once questioned her own usefulness. "He does not often come before December, but this year was different. Something called him back early. No one knows what." Clara carried the linen to the linen press and did not offer an opinion. "He stays through to March," Prue continued, clearly not requiring a response. "Then back to London. He is a very quiet man. Not cold, mind you. Not like the old Duke was cold. This one is just private. Keeps to himself. Takes Lily out riding on Saturday mornings, every Saturday without fail, even in the rain." Every Saturday, Clara repeated, because she could not help it. Without fail, Prue confirmed. That child has him wound entirely round her little finger, and he pretends not to notice. It is very sweet. Clara put the linen in the press and closed it. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. She did not see the Duke. She worked through the pile of household washing with steady hands, and a mind she kept deliberately blank. The way she had learned to keep it over 6 years of understanding, that if she let herself think at length about any of it, she would not be able to function at all. She had come to Brackmere Hall in September because she had run out of other choices. The positions in town had dried up, her landlady had required the room, and a woman alone with no character reference from any house of standing had very few options left to her. She had taken the laundry maid position under her mother name, which was Voss, and she had told herself it was only temporary, and she had told herself the same thing 4 months later, and she expected she would go on telling herself until something changed, or she was found out, whichever came first. She had not planned for him to come home early. She had not planned for Lily to find her in the yard. She was folding the last of the sheets when the Dowager Duchess came into the laundry room. The Dowager did not often come below stairs. She was a woman of 70 who moved through the house with the authority of someone who had built it herself, though in fact she had merely married into it 50 years ago and outlasted everyone else. She wore black, as she always wore black, and she carried a small silver-handled stick that she did not need for walking and used primarily for emphasis. She stopped in the doorway of the laundry room and looked at Clara. Clara looked back. The Dowager Duchess said nothing for the span of perhaps 5 seconds. Then she said, in a voice that could have cut glass, "I want you gone from this house by morning." Clara set down the sheet she was holding. "I have done nothing to warrant dismissal," she said. Her voice was steady. She had had a long time to practice steadiness. "You have done nothing yet," the Dowager said. "That is precisely the logic. You will go tonight, or I will tell my son who you are." and when I tell him who you are, I will also tell him what you did. And you will find that his memory of the matter differs considerably from yours." Clara looked at the old woman and felt something very old and very cold settle in her chest. "What I did," Clara said, "was marry your son. What you did," the dowager said, "was attach yourself to a man of rank by deception, and then extort this family when the truth came to light. That is what I told him. That is what I will tell him again. And he believed me 6 years ago, and he is older now and more tired, and tired men believe what costs them least to believe." She turned and left. Clara stood alone in the laundry room with the folded sheets and the sound of the dowager stick receding down the passage, and she breathed in slowly and then out slowly, and put both hands flat on the worktable. She thought about leaving. She had thought about leaving every day for 4 months. She had not left because of Saturday mornings, because of a red wool coat in a church pew, because of a piece of bread held out by a barefoot child on a frozen yard. She went back to folding. There were things Clara was good at. She was good at laundry, which was to say she was good at hard work performed with precision over long hours, without recognition or variety. She was good at being invisible in the way that only women who have been reduced to invisibility can truly master it, which is to say she could move through a room full of people and leave no impression at all. She was also good at medicine. Her mother had been a midwife in the village of Ashton Cross, and Clara had grown up learning the names of plants and the uses of them, and the difference between a chill that would pass and a chill that would not, and how to bring a fever down in a child when a physician was 3 hours away by road. She had not expected this knowledge to matter at Brackmere Hall. In the 2nd week of November, Lily got sick. It started as a cough. Clara heard it from the yard on a Tuesday morning, faint and high from the nursery window above. By Thursday the cough had become something deeper, and on Friday morning Prue came down to the laundry with her face tight and unhappy, and said that the child had a fever, and the physician had been sent for, but the roads were frozen, and he could not come until the following day. Clara put down her work. "What is her temperature?" she asked. Prue looked at her oddly. "Very high. Her nurse is frightened. What compresses are they using?" Prue blinked. "I do not know that they are using any." Clara untied her apron. She walked up the back stairs, which she was not supposed to use above the 1st floor. She walked along the upper corridor, which she was not supposed to enter. She stopped outside the nursery door, and she knocked. And when the nurse opened the door with a face white with worry, Clara said, "I know what to do. Let me in." The nurse hesitated. The sound from inside the room was not quite a moan and not quite a breath, and it decided the matter. The nurse stepped back. Lily was in the bed. She was very small in it, smaller than she had seemed in the yard. Her face was flushed a dark red, and her hair was damp at the temples, and her eyes, when they opened, did not fully focus. Clara crossed the room and put her hand on the child's forehead and calculated. High, but not the highest she had seen. Manageable, if managed now. She told the nurse to bring cold water and clean rags, and she told the housemaid hovering in the doorway to fetch whatever dried lavender and chamomile were in the kitchen stores, and to boil water for a compress. She pulled the heavy blankets back because a child that hot needed air, not wool, and she sat on the edge of the bed and put a cool cloth on the small forehead and began to talk very quietly and very steadily about nothing at all, about the yard in the morning, about the weight of a wet sheet, about the way the elm trees looked without their leaves. She was still talking half an hour later when the door opened. The Duke stood in the doorway. He looked at the scene before him, his daughter in the bed with a compress on her head. A laundry maid sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his daughter's hand, speaking in a low, continuous voice that had, Clara understood from the change in the child breathing, been helping. He did not speak. Clara did not stop. She kept her voice at the same quiet level and applied the next compress and did not look at him again, because looking at him had a cost she could not currently pay. He stayed in the doorway for a long time. Then he came into the room and sat in the chair by the window and watched, and Clara worked, and the child slept. The fever broke before midnight. Clara was standing at the washstand wringing out the last of the compresses when she felt him behind her. Not touching, only present. The way he had always been present, filling whatever room he occupied with a quiet that was not emptiness but substance. She said without turning, she will be well by morning. Keep her warm but not too warm. Plain broth when she wakes. No rich food for 3 days. There was a silence. Then he said, "What is your name?" She paused with her hands in the water. "Clara," she said. Another silence. "Longer. I know a Clara," he said. "She is not you." He left. She stood at the washstand with her hands in the cold water and the compress folded in her fists, and she closed her eyes and pressed them shut until the feeling passed. 3 days later, Lily came to find her in the yard again. She was entirely recovered. She came in her red coat this time and her slippers, and she stood at the edge of the laundry yard with her hands behind her back, and said, "Nurse told me you made me better." "I helped," Clara said. She did not correct this. There was no version of a correction that would not lead somewhere she was not yet prepared to go. Lily studied her with the same frank assessment she had applied in their first meeting. "Papa asked about you," she said. What did he ask? He asked Nurse who the laundry maid was who came upstairs. He did not look angry. He looked like he was trying to remember something. Clara turned back to the linen. "Your papa is a very busy man. You should not take up his time with stories about the laundry maids." "But you are not just a laundry maid," Lily said, with the absolute confidence of a 6-year-old who has decided something. Clara wrung out a sheet with both hands and said nothing. Lily stayed in the yard for another 20 minutes, sitting on the stone step and watching Clara work and providing a running account of everything she currently found interesting in the world, which included a grey cat that lived in the stable, a puzzle her governess had given her that she suspected was missing a piece, and the strong opinion that porridge was better with honey than without. Clara listened to all of it. She stored all of it. She went on working. The following Saturday, she positioned herself at the laundry room window at the correct hour and watched the Duke and Lily ride out across the frost. The child on a small grey pony and the man on a dark horse, riding slowly so that she could keep pace. He was laughing at something she had said. Clara could see it even at this distance, the way the severity left his face entirely when he looked at his daughter. She watched them until they were past the elm trees and out of sight. Then the Dowager Duchess walked into the laundry room and said, "You are still here." "I am," Clara said. "I will not warn you again." Clara folded a sheet with precise movements. "You warned me," she said. "I heard you, and I am still here." The Dowager looked at her for a long moment, and then she said, in a voice so quiet it was almost gentle, "He will not believe you. He is too proud to believe he was deceived by his own mother. It will be easier for him to believe you are what I told him you were." Clara said nothing. "He loved you once," the Dowager said. "That is exactly why he will not let himself look at it clearly. Because if he looks, he must confront what I did. And that will cost him everything he thinks he knows about his family." She waited, as though expecting Clara to respond. Clara picked up the next sheet. The Dowager left. 2 days later, the Duke came to the laundry yard at an hour when Clara was there alone. He did not approach. He stood at the edge of the yard near the kitchen garden wall and looked at her with the grey gaze that had not changed in 7 years, and finally said, "I would like to speak with you." "Not here." "This evening, if you are willing. I have a matter I cannot resolve." Clara looked at him. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. He nodded and left. She put both hands against the stone wall and leaned there for a moment, breathing, before going back to work. He received her in the library. It was a room she had been in only once before, on the morning after their wedding, when he had shown it to her with the shy pride of a man sharing something he loved. She had stood at the window looking out over the grounds and thought that she had never been so happy, and that happiness was terrifying in its completeness. That was 7 years ago. The room was the same. The books were the same. The fire in the grate was built the same way, high and bright, throwing long shadows toward the door. He was standing at the window when she came in, and he turned, and for a moment neither of them moved. He said, "Please sit." She sat. He did not. He moved to the fire and stood with his back to it, and looked at her directly, the way he had always looked at things he was trying to understand. "When my daughter was ill," he said, "you did something that none of my household staff knew to do. You came upstairs without being asked. You overruled the standard response." Clara said nothing. "I asked where you came from before you came here," he said. "Your history at other houses. You gave your name as Voss when you were hired. Yes, Your Grace. My mother gave me, 6 years ago, a name." He paused. He was choosing each word with the care of someone who understood that words, once released, could not be gathered back again. The woman she described had your face and your hands and your way of being still in a room. Clara waited. "She told me you had stolen from this house," he said. "She told me you had come here under a false name and extracted promises from a member of this family and then demanded money when the deception was revealed. She said you had been paid and that you had agreed to go and not return." He stopped. "She said it very simply," Clara said. "Did she not? She had the document prepared. She had people who would swear to it." He went very still. "How do you know that?" he said. "Unless you were there." "I was there," Clara said. "I was in this house. I had been in this house for 11 months. I was not a guest." She reached into the bodice of her dress. It was not a gesture she had planned, and yet she had been carrying the document so long that the reaching for it had become a reflex. She drew out a folded paper. It was thin with age and soft at the creases, and she held it out toward him. He crossed the room and took it. He unfolded it. She watched his face. She had thought about this moment for 6 years. She had imagined anger, or denial, or the cold withdrawal that pride produces in a man who has been made to feel foolish. She had not imagined what actually happened, which was that his face went entirely blank for a long moment, and then something beneath it cracked, and he sat down in the nearest chair as though his legs had simply stopped working, and he read it again. "This is a marriage record," he said. "It is. It is dated 7 years ago. It is. It has my name on it. And it has the name Clara Ashton." "Yes." He looked up. She held his gaze because she owed him that, even though it was one of the most difficult things she had done, and she had done several difficult things in her life. "She lied to me," he said, not as a question. "She told you I was gone," Clara said. "She arranged for me to be taken from the house in the night. She paid a woman in the village to swear that I had stolen the household silver. She had the church registry altered. She kept the primary copy of this document and destroyed it. I had made a second copy. I did not know at the time what I was protecting against. I only knew that I was frightened, and that paper was all I had. Why did you not come back?" he said. His voice was very controlled, but there was something beneath it that was not controlled at all. "I came back twice," she said. "The first time I was turned away at the gate. The second time your mother met me in the village and told me that if I came again she would see me arrested. She had the means. I did not." He sat with the document in his hands and said nothing for a long time. Then the door opened. The dowager walked in. She had been listening from the passage. Clara had understood, from the moment she sat down, that the old woman would not allow this conversation to reach its conclusion uninterrupted. She had prepared for it. The dowager looked at the document in her son's hand, and then at Clara, and then at her son, and her face was composed and still and entirely certain of itself. "That document is a forgery," she said. "This woman had one made. I have already sent for the magistrate. She has been attempting to extort this family for 6 years. I have a letter here, in her own hand, threatening to go to the papers with a fabricated account of a secret marriage unless she was paid further funds." She held out a letter. The Duke looked at it. He did not take it. He looked at his mother with the expression of a man who has been standing in a dim room and has just understood that the dimness was not the room but his own eyes. "I have my own handwriting," Clara said quietly. "In the library. 4 letters I wrote to him from Bath in the summer of his commission. I left them here. I left everything here when she had me removed. If the handwriting on that letter matches mine, then the letter may be as she says. If it does not match, then we have an answer." The Duke stood. He went to the desk in the corner of the room without speaking. He opened the 3rd drawer, which Clara knew existed because she had watched him use it once, and she had a very precise memory. He drew out a bundle of letters tied with a blue ribbon, and he set them on the desk, and he laid the letter from his mother beside them. He looked at both for a long time. His mother had not moved. He said, still looking at the letters, "The capital letters are entirely different. The B in Bath is nothing like the B on this document. The hand is similar, but it is not the same." He turned and looked at his mother. The dowager said, very carefully, "I have protected this family." "From what?" he said. She opened her mouth and closed it. He picked up the original marriage document. He held it for a moment, and then he said, more quietly than Clara expected, "Mother, you will go to your rooms. You will remain there until I send for you." The dowager looked at him. Then she looked at Clara. Then she turned and left, and this time her stick made no sound on the floor. The Duke stood in the library with the letters in one hand and the marriage record in the other, and he looked at Clara, and he said nothing at all for a very long time. Then Lily appeared in the doorway. She had her hair in its nighttime plait and her slippers on, and she was looking between the 2 adults in the room with the calm assessment of a child who has learned to read rooms. "Papa," she said, "you look strange." "I am well," he said. "How did you get past your nurse?" Lily considered whether to answer this, and apparently decided honesty was worth the risk. "I climbed out," she said. She looked at Clara. "Are you crying?" she asked. Clara put her hand to her face and discovered that she was in fact crying, in the way that crying happens when you have held something for so long that the moment the pressure lifts the whole structure gives way at once. "I am," she said. Lily crossed the room and took Clara's hand with both of hers. "She has kind hands," Lily told her father, with the absolute authority of a 6-year-old conveying important information. "I noticed it in the yard." The Duke looked at his daughter, and then at Clara, and then at the joined hands between them. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite something else. "Yes," he said, "I know." He set the documents on the desk. He crossed to where they stood, Lily between them, and he crouched down to his daughter level and said, "Lily, this is Clara." "I know," Lily said. "She is the laundry maid." "She is rather more than that," he said. Lily looked between them again, and then at her father with the expression of a child who has been given a corner of a larger picture and knows it. "Is she going to stay?" she asked. He looked at Clara. Clara looked back. "I very much hope so," he said. "It was not resolved in an evening. Nothing of that size is resolved in an evening. There were documents to be properly verified, and conversations that needed to happen with men who understood the legal weight of a marriage record. and there was the matter of the dowager, who remained in her rooms for 10 days and emerged looking neither contrite nor defeated, but rather like a woman who had gambled and lost, and intended to conduct herself with dignity about it. She did not speak to Clara. Clara did not require her to. The Duke handled it quietly and methodically, the way he handled everything, which was to say he gathered the facts and then acted on them without drama. He sent to London for a solicitor. He wrote to the vicar who had conducted the ceremony, who was elderly but alive, and remembered the occasion with perfect clarity. He had the altered registry entry examined by 2 men of learning who confirmed, in writing, that the amendment had been made by a different hand and at a later date. Clara, during this period, continued to work. This was Prue's idea, actually. Prue who had said when Clara told her a carefully edited version of events that the best thing for everyone involved was for Clara to remain exactly where she was and do exactly what she had always done until the matter was settled. Because a woman who kept her hands busy during uncertainty was a woman no one could easily destabilise. Clara thought this was the wisest thing she had heard in several years. She worked in the laundry until the middle of December. She worked with the same steady hands and the same precise attention she had always brought to it, and Brackmere Hall had very clean linen indeed during those 3 weeks. Lily came to the yard every morning. Sometimes she helped, or attempted to help, which mostly resulted in a smaller version of the work requiring redoing with gentler results. Sometimes she sat on the step and talked. On 2 occasions she brought her governess puzzle, which it turned out was not missing a piece, but had a piece that looked like 2 pieces had been stuck together, and Clara and Lily solved it between them on the stone step one afternoon, while the Duke watched from the kitchen garden gate, without making his presence known, which Clara was entirely aware of and did not mention. He came to speak with her in the yard the morning after the solicitor confirmed everything in writing. He did not make a speech. He was not a man who made speeches. He stood in the yard in his coat with his hands in his pockets, and he said, "The solicitor is satisfied. The church record has been restored. You are, legally and entirely, who you have always been." Clara held a sheet against her chest and looked at him. "I know," she said. He almost smiled. "I have been attempting to compose a sufficient apology for 6 days," he said. "I do not think one exists. I should have questioned what I was told. I should have looked harder. I should have believed what I knew of you over what I was told of you." "You were told by your mother," Clara said. "That is not an excuse." "No," she agreed. "But it is a reason." He looked at her steadily. She looked back. She did not make it easier for him by speaking. Because there was a thing he needed to arrive at himself, and arriving at things was how this particular man understood them. He said, finally, "I would like to do this correctly if you will permit it. I would like to begin again, not from the lie, not from where she had us, from here." Clara considered this. She thought about the yard in September, when she had come to this estate on the last of her options, and told herself it was temporary. She thought about the church pew and the red coat and the bread in a small outstretched hand. She thought about a frozen morning and a child who had run barefoot across the frost toward a stranger and offered what she had. She had not run away from any of it. She had stayed. She said, "I am here, am I not?" He almost smiled again, and this time it reached. They walked inside together. It was not a grand entrance. There were no witnesses in the hall to mark it. Only Prue, who was coming down the main stairs with a stack of pressed linen, and who stopped, looked at the 2 of them side by side, looked at the Duke, looked at Clara, and then turned directly around and went back up the stairs without a word, which was the most discreet thing Clara had ever seen a person do. In the days that followed, Lily decided that the correct approach to the situation was to behave as though it had always been this way, which made it considerably easier for everyone else to do the same. She referred to Clara by her name rather than by her position, which below stairs produced a period of adjustment, and above stairs produced a period of adjustment of an entirely different kind. But children have a way of normalizing what adults would otherwise negotiate for months, and within a fortnight Lily had simply worn the novelty off the subject through sheer repetition. She showed Clara the grey cat in the stable. His name was Admiral, and he had an opinion about everything and allowed himself to be held only on his own terms, which Lily said was because he had dignity. "He has a great deal of dignity," Clara agreed. "Papa says dignity is what people call stubbornness when they want to be polite about it." Clara looked at the cat, who was regarding her with complete indifference. "Your papa is not wrong. Christmas at Brackmere Hall that year was a quiet one. The dowager remained in her rooms through most of it. There were no large parties. There was instead a great deal of snow and a great deal of fire, and a small girl who had asked for and received a book about horses, and who read portions of it aloud at dinner with the dedication of someone who understood that knowledge about horses was essential to life. On the evening of the 26th of December, after Lily had been carried to bed asleep mid-sentence about the correct feeding of a grey pony in winter, the Duke and Clara sat together in the library where this had all come apart and where it had all come together again. He said, without looking away from the fire, when Lily was born, "I thought I understood what it meant to love something without condition. I did not know what to do with it. I am better at it now." Clara looked at the fire beside him. "You are very good at it," she said. He looked at her. "I am trying," he said, "with her, and with this, if you will let me." She had let him. She had been letting him since the morning in the yard when he had looked at her and said, "You are here," with those words that were so plainly not only about her physical presence but about everything else as well, and she had understood it then, even if she had not been ready to move toward it. She was ready now. She reached across the space between them, and she put her hand over his where it rested on the arm of the chair. He looked at their hands, then at her. She said, "I stayed." "Yes," he said, "I know." He turned his hand under hers and held it. Outside the library windows, the snow was falling in the dark, very quietly, over the elm trees and the yard and the stone step where a child had sat with a laundry maid and worked a puzzle in the winter sun. The house was warm. Lily was sleeping. The fire burned high. She did not reach for yesterday. She simply took his hand, and that was enough.